Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkaptrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, yes. So we're going to go through this evening. The intention is the second section, which is from verse 6 to verse 11. Not a big section, but we've got time. We have some time. We have actually, to finish Bhagavad Gita, we have this week, the following, and then the third week. So we got 3 full weeks, including today, to finish the entire Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 18 is very big, so that'll take at least a week, or even maybe a day or two more than a week. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But anyway, so this chapter 15, then 16 and 17, basically we've got 2 weeks, 10 days, maybe 8 days, it just depends. But roughly like that. Okay. So yes, this section then, we've titled Transmigrations, and it begins with verse 6, and it goes on to verse 11. So let us read those verses. The translations. Verse 6, that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Wow, okay. That's pretty clear, isn't it? That's pretty clear. Okay, now verse 7. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Yeah, 6 senses which include the mind. Just a sec here. All right. Verse 8. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Verse 9. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects, or tries to enjoy. Tries to enjoy. It's not easy in this material world, and I think you've noticed. Verse 10. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Wow, yeah. This is all the process of transmigration in some detail. Very nice, very interesting. And verse 11. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. Okay. So those who are in Purushottam Yoga, in other words, they can understand how these things are working. But others who are on the material level, it's such a mystery. It is just beyond them. Even generally, it's beyond those who have some idea that there may be something such as reincarnation, transmigration. It's a shame, isn't it? It's just amazing. Okay, just a sec, please. All right. So, let us go into a little more detail then. Verse 6, that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So, yes, it's a brief glimpse into the spiritual world. We haven't had so much detail. We've definitely had some mention of the spiritual abode where you go and you don't come back from if you're fully Krishna conscious. But this is like an interesting and important detail about it. First of all, it belongs to Krishna. It is mine, Krishna says. And there's no need of illumination even by the sun or the moon. What to speak of fire or electricity. Yeah. So, well, that's because everything is self-luminous. Krishna is self-luminous. The planets are self-luminous. Everything, just everything and everyone is self-luminous. The gems, the jewels are self-luminous. You know, there are descriptions, there are many descriptions actually, how even within this world, in India at least, when you go back to Vedic times, like even just the time of Krishna 5,000 years ago, which in terms of Vedic time is not a long time. So there were jewels which were self-luminous. Yes. And they say, I've heard at least, that they used to use those jewels in houses by positioning them in the walls, and then they would illuminate. And I heard that in the Red Fort in Delhi, there are, now of course there's none of the jewels left, don't worry about that. But I heard that there are kind of holes or little recesses in the walls in some places where such jewels were situated. Did you hear about that, Maharaj?
Yes, it used to be, but now stolen all.
Huh.
But the symptoms are there still. The holes are still there.
The holes are there.
Most of them are stolen.
Oh yes, of course. So you saw, Maharaj, the
Yes.
holes? Maharaj has been there, you know. I've been to India so many times. I first went in 76, so what's that? 44 years. I never been into the Red Fort. Maybe sometime. I've never been to the Taj Mahal. I went to the palace of the Maharaj of Bharatpur in Deeg. Did you ever go there? The palace?
Deeg I didn't go to palace.
Oh, you didn't go?
Deeg I didn't.
It's nice.
Parikrama we go there.
Huh, yes. We went there once and did video. But if you're a foreigner, you have to pay more.
Okay.
A lot more. Like, I don't know, 5 or 10 times more. Anyway, okay, let's get back to Bhagavad Gita. Right, so everything is self-luminous. Now we're looking at the first paragraph now. So it is self-revealing, self-dependent. Like that. Self-sufficient, devoid of miseries such as heat and cold. And the illumination, Prabhupada mentions here in the middle of the purport, the shining effulgence of those planets, the Vaikuntha planets and Goloka Vrindavan, constitutes the shining sky known as Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. But part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this material world, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. And okay, now on to paragraph 2. Prabhupada makes an interesting statement. Let's see, where is it now? Yeah, right. Here it is. Let me just read it. Two sentences. As long as the living entity is in this dark material world, he's in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false perverted tree, remember the tree from Friday. We got to cut it down. We got to cut it at the roots. Well, anyway, we got to cut it down. Yeah. And then become liberated. So cutting through the false perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there's no chance of his coming back here. Whoa, that's a strong statement. No chance. In the verse, of course, what is said is, those who reach it never return to this material world, which is strong enough anyway, but this is even stronger. There is no chance of his coming back here. Gosh, I hope so. I tell you what, my Lord, do I hope so? Do I hope so? Sure. Okay, paragraph 3. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada, let's just read it here. It's very interesting. One should be captivated by this information. One should find it very interesting. This is sort of promotional material for Goloka Vrindavan, if you know what I mean. Back in the old days, I haven't done it for years, but I used to go to a travel agent Bobby Naidu's in Durban. How many times did I go there? To buy tickets, now we just do it on the internet, but even now, I haven't traveled since I got back in February. But anyway, in the travel agency, they have all these brochures. Go and visit this place and that place and have a holiday here and there and see the different sights and enjoy the whatever. You know what I mean. And this is kind of similar for Goloka Vrindavan and the spiritual world. It's just such a wonderful place. In this case, it's true. In this case, it's true. You know, in the past, I've been to Mauritius many times, so many times, and of course India, but let's just mention Mauritius. I've been there many times, and it's one of the favorite holiday destinations for kind of generally fairly wealthy South Africans. Yeah, because it's expensive. Wow. So, yeah, so the South Africans go and it's like, yeah, let's go to Mauritius. Wow. And we'll have a nice time. But the Mauritians, many Mauritians are thinking that let's go to South Africa. Let's get off this island. Oh my God, this island. Really? Seriously? Let's get out of here. Let's go to South Africa. So, you know, it's just advertising. And advertising is not always very real. They're basically trying to induce you, even trick you to get your money. Yeah. But now this is real. This is true. Goloka Vrindavan particularly, and the Vaikuntha planets also, but particularly Goloka Vrindavan. What a place! Oh, and therefore Prabhupada begins the third paragraph. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it's very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there's a chance of gradually becoming detached. And just an interesting little point here from Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan in his purport to this verse. He says that Krishna says that pada, which means abode, actually. The pada means the abode, that place. That place. Just a sec. So that place includes my swarup, my form, which is full of all excellences. Though the sun and moon and light illuminate everything, they do not illuminate that form, Krishna's form. The Shrutis, Vedic scriptures, say that the sun does not exist there. That form of mine, Krishna speaking, cannot be lit by the sun, but rather that form which the sun cannot reveal illuminates the sun and all other luminaries. That's a good one, isn't it? That's a good one. Not only does the form of the Lord in the spiritual world, because here we're talking about well, particularly Goloka Vrindavan, not only does the form of Krishna not need the sun or some lighting or something like that, but actually the sun, etc., cannot light that form. Just like, in a sense, just like if we're in the middle of the day in a room like this room, and if the curtains are open and we switch on the lights, then nothing becomes lit up really anymore. Or particularly, at night, here now night is coming in Durban. At night, when it's actually dark, if you go outside with a candle, for example, or a torch, well, let's just say a candle in the middle of the night, and it lights up, it definitely helps. But in the middle of the day, you go out with a candle lit, it makes no difference. Just makes no difference at all. Zero difference. So similarly, the body of Krishna is so amazing and so effulgent that the sun cannot illuminate it. Just like a candle cannot illuminate the daytime. Right. And rather, that form of the Lord illuminates the sun. It lights the sun up even brighter. Okay, so Prabhupada concludes the purport. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. Okay. Well, actually, Prabhupada's not concluding the purport, sorry. Did I say that? No, just Prabhupada comments. It's just a comment. Excuse me. It's the second to last paragraph. All right, so anyway, let's carry on. We have a special question here for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri, based on this verse 6. But actually, we are referring here to a verse. It's a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, chapter 24, verse 60. Canto 8, chapter 24, verse 60. Just give me a sec. And there, the verse says, one who narrates this description of the Matsya incarnation and King Satyavrata will certainly have all his ambitions fulfilled, and he will undoubtedly return home back to Godhead. Sure, okay. Anyway, the question, I don't know, but well, this is the question. I don't make up the questions. So the question is, we want you to cite a Srimad Bhagavatam verse that was mentioned in class, this verse here, about returning home back to Godhead. What was the verse? And of course it was Srimad Bhagavatam 8:24-60. Try and remember that if you can. Right ho, so on to verse 7. Yeah, and this is it's another, we've had a few, another verse, definitive verse, talking about the spirit soul. Verse 7, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So Lord Krishna is saying, in effect, as that abode is mine, you are also mine, but you have forgotten. So yes, we're struggling. What a grand struggle it is in this material world. So, purport's, not short. Let's have a look here. So Srila Prabhupada begins the purport. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. So, in the first paragraph, Prabhupada's focusing on the statement here that we are fragments, fragmental parts of Krishna, not temporarily, but now also, we're also now fragments of Krishna. And we also have his qualities, fragmentally and eternally. Yeah. So the thing is this, of course there are many examples given. One example which is given is the gold in a gold mine and the gold in some gold jewelry or ornament like that. That the gold in the jewelry is no less valuable than the gold in the mine. Means qualitatively, it's not like it's a lower grade of gold. It's just as valuable per whatever measurement, per gram. It's as valuable as the gold in the mine per gram. But the difference is there in quantity. Oh, the difference. Really. So like this, if we want to understand Krishna, in fact, Prabhupada does make this point elsewhere really. If you want to understand Krishna, in one sense, you can just look at yourself. And at least you'll definitely get some good ideas about Krishna. You are conscious, he's conscious. You're a person, he's a person. You have feelings, he has feelings. You love, he loves. You have relationships, he has relationships, activities, form, etc., etc. All these things. So Prabhupada's focusing on this first paragraph, and again, so many times Prabhupada said it, but he says it again, that we have our personal individuality and a minute form of independence. Individuality and independence. Minute. Personal individuality, meaning we are definitely individuals, fully individuals. But we have little independence, not so much. Not so much. We already talked about that before. And so, of course, and Prabhupada explains, by misuse of that independence, we have arrived here in this world. So, Srila Prabhupada here, in this second paragraph, just past the halfway point, Srila Prabhupada quotes a whole lot of Sanskrit from Madhyandinayana Shruti. So, which means it is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body we can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear, what? Yeah, he can hear and speak to him face to face and understand the Lord as he is. Yeah. You know, there's a nice description in this regard, very clear description, in the first canto when Narada Muni is telling his story, the story of his life, his previous life. He was the son of a maidservant. Mother died when he was just 5. But then he went searching for the Lord. And practicing Krishna consciousness. And step by step, he came to the perfectional point. And then he died. He left his body. And the one verse there, I forget the exact chapter number, but it's one of those around 5, 6, 7, something like that. Narada Muni tells Srila Vyasadeva that when he died, then he left his body, and his spiritual body, his eternal spiritual body, as well, in his case, as Narada Muni, the great traveling sage, but in the case of many others, maybe a cowherd boy, maybe a gopi, maybe a cow even, and so on. So his spiritual body as Narada Muni manifested, and the verse says, very clearly, Narada says, that I left my body, just like that, out of the body. And just like that, spiritual body manifested. And the actual words he uses are, just like lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. At night if there's an electric storm, sometimes we get these electric storms. We used to get in Cato Ridge, our country ashram many years ago, we used to get electric storms in the night. It's full night, it's just totally dark. And you get all this lightning just coming and coming and coming and coming. And it just lights everything up, at least for some seconds, just like daytime. Just like daytime on an overcast day. It's interesting. So just like lightning and illumination occurs simultaneously, he just left his body and his spiritual body just came out like that. Right. Okay. Then paragraph 3. Paragraph 3. That Srila Prabhupada explains that the words mamai vangsa, which mean that we are fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. Yeah, well, how's this for an example? if you get some, like a samosa, and you break off and a fragment, now you've got two pieces, and it's become a broken thing. And the part you've broken off is, maybe you just break off some small part. So now it's just some broken part. It's not like the whole samosa. That's one type of example. So we are fragmental parts of Krishna, but not like that, like just broken off. Something got broken off. Yeah. Like in a car, in an earthquake. Sometimes buildings, just part of a building just breaks off. And then, it's just a broken piece. So it's not like we're just broken pieces. We're persons, we're individuals. But we're still fragments of Lord Krishna. So, and Prabhupada explains further. Let's just read a little here. We've already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment, that's us, is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here. Because in this verse, in fact, the Sanskrit word sanatan is used, which means eternal. Okay. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, that fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as parts and parcels of gold are also gold, as we've said. So, here's a couple of interesting little statements. First of all, Baladev Vijayabhushan. He says that Krishna says, in his purport to this verse, the jiva is part of me, the Supreme Lord, alone, mama eva angsa, not part of Brahma or Shiva, who are also lords, but not supreme. That's a good one, isn't it? They're parts of Krishna alone. Then we are not parts of Lord Shiva or Durga or Lord Brahma. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, here's an interesting little statement. The jiva is eternal and in the conditioned state drags the senses, the sixth of which is the mind, situated in prakriti, situated in delusion. So the jiva, in the conditioned state, drags the senses like a person who drags chains, bolted on his feet, which he proudly accepts, thinking, these are mine. That's good, isn't it? He's chained up like a ball and chain around his ankles, bolted onto his feet. He's just dragging them around, dragging the chains around. So in our conditioned state, we are dragging our material senses. And they're just like those chains. But we're thinking, they are mine. Very nice. So, okay, let's carry on. Verse 8. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So now verse 7, as we just said, it has explained how we're struggling. And actually Prabhupada mentioned that we're dragging our senses around like chains also. And we just read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, it's like we're dragging these bodies around. We're dragging the senses around. And that, in the Western hippie or youth colloquial language, we're dragging these things around, and it's a drag. It's a real drag. So 7 has explained how we're struggling like this. So here now, verses 8 and 9 are explaining some of the details of how we're being dragged by the senses. So here, the idea, Lord Krishna is presenting the idea of the air. Air, of course, moves around. And sometimes air, normally the air, it has no smell. Earth is the element which has smell. But the air passes across something which has a smell, like flowers, obviously. I mean, certain flowers. Here, we used to have, maybe we'll get back again later on, we used to have what's called night blooming jasmine. It's closed during the day, there's no smell, but at night it opens up, and the smell is overpowering. You can smell it, strongly, at least 10 meters away, and more too. So it's not that the air has now got an odor, because air does not have that quality. But it has borrowed that smell. Yes. So like this, we are situated in these material bodies, and they have no life, they have no real identity, they have no real capabilities. Without the soul, they're dead bodies. But just like the air associates with something, it might be flowers, it might be some horrible rubbish, or, something, sewage even. And now the air has passed across that, picked up the smell, and the air moves on, and you're on the other side, a little away from that smelly thing. But when the air reaches you, it's still carrying the smell. So like this, we're getting these bodies, and actually we have nothing to do with material life. Like the air has nothing to do with any smell. But we have these material bodies, and we are carrying that, the nature of that body in our material lives for a while, although later we drop it. Just as the air drops the smell, and if you go some 100 meters away or something, then it's quite possible that you may not smell the bad smell or the nice smell, because the air has dropped it after a little while. So the soul drops the body after a while and gets another. Just as the air drops the smell and then carries on and then picks up another smell. So this is the idea. So Prabhupada's making the point that Our future is in our hands. Our future is in our hands. Right at the beginning, Prabhupada says of the purport, the change his body undergoes depends upon him. So how we live, we're going to get in the next body. Yeah. Or we can go to Goloka Vrindavan. Yeah. So then, when you go on to the next body, you carry the conceptions with you into the next body. Therefore, you get a next body in terms of your previous lifetime. Yeah. If you cultivated a certain consciousness, you take the consciousness with you and get a body in terms of that consciousness. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a comment, having gone into a body, what does he do? He takes shelter of the senses, such as the ear and also the mind, and tries to enjoy the objects of the senses, such as sound. Yeah. Oops, wait a minute. Where am I going? So verse 9, I'm sorry, I skipped on. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, you take shelter of the senses of the body. Each body has its particular senses, and you get one body, it has a certain set of senses. You get another body, it has a different set of senses. And whatever body you get, you just accept those senses and take shelter of them, and they then control your life. Yeah. So Prabhupada explains that through developing a certain type of consciousness, you get a certain set of senses and you become controlled by them. And therefore we find in different species, they have different likes and dislikes. And Srila Prabhupada gives the classic example, does he? Well, he doesn't here actually. But elsewhere he gives the classic example that we like nice halava, but the pig doesn't. The pig prefers stall. So Prabhupada explains in the purport, consciousness is originally pure like water, but if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure, but consciousness is changed according to the association of material qualities. Your consciousness changes, you get a different body with a different set of senses, which you become completely invested in. And look, here's another special question for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri, based on this verse 9. So this is a verse now from Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela chapter 6, verse 199. Antya Leela 6, 199. Those who are attached to materialistic life and are blind to spiritual life must act in such a way that they're bound to repeated birth and death by the actions and reactions of their activities. So we want you to refer to this verse, Caitanya Charitamrita verse, which we've just mentioned now, about repeated birth and death, which explains that those who are attached to what and who are blind to spiritual life must act in such a way that they're bound to repeated birth and death by the what and what of their activities. And the answers are attached to material life and bound to repeated birth and death by the actions and inactions, reactions. There's a mistake here. Krishna. Anyway, these things happen. Actions and reactions of their activities. Okay, so let's go on to 10. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Yeah, this sort of point has been made in chapter 13, chapter 14 also. Training, education, hearing from authorities, learning how to practice Krishna consciousness or Purushottam yoga. This is essential. And if you do that, then you'll understand what is your position in this world. Who are you? How is this world working? And what is really the goal of life? Going back to Godhead, and then you can do that. So the point is that foolish people can't do that. They can't see these things. The devotees can, because the devotees are practicing Purushottam yoga. So Srila Prabhupada explains at the beginning, the word jnana chakshusha is very, what am I doing here? 10. The word jnana chakshusha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he's living in a particular type of body. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master. One who's trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. So we see how Prabhupada was giving that training again and again as just massive amounts of training in his books, in his classes, in his preaching. Just again and again and again, and it's just thousands of times, helping us to see what is the situation here and how we can get out of it by devotional service. And therefore Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying that those who are really developed in Krishna consciousness, they really try to give this knowledge to the ordinary people, the foolish people, who are struggling and just suffering in material life. For their conditional life is very much troublesome. Oh, my God, it's fantastic, actually. So those conditioned people should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. All right, so verse 11. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. Many people in material life are trying to figure out how to live better. Just like a few days ago, it's sort of still going on. There was the election in America, and maybe you sort of saw in the news some of the things happening. And there's so many people thinking, because now the president, it appears, is going to be a different man who, has a really different character, from the from Mr. Trump. And people are celebrating like, wow, this man's coming in. Life is just going to be wonderful. Little do they know, it's really going to be troublesome also. It's really going to be troublesome. Yes. So this is what material life is like. That if you're entangled on the material platform, and Prabhupada explains, even if someone practices some form of yoga, Prabhupada mentions here, that in the present day, there are many so-called yogis, and there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they're actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. So we have to practice this Purushottam Yoga, which is basically devotional service. And then we'll become situated as stated here. We'll see what's going on in the material world very clearly. But then we'll also go back to Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada comments that, concludes the purport, only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord, in other words, the Bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place and then go back to Godhead. So, okay, we'll carry on tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.